All right, here we go. Welcome to another episode of the Non-Victimation Podcast. And today I have my very good friend, Sergio Olvera. I almost forgot your first name. I'm sorry.
So let's be good friends.
No, because I was so focused on making sure I said your last name right that I was
You forgot
stumbled
my
over the
first
first
name.
name.
It's
Yeah.
not important.
That guy. And plus which I'm used to calling you Serge. So,
Yeah, actually, because I am a junior, and growing up, everyone's be like, "Hey, Sergio," and both me and my dad would turn around. And I was like,
right,
"All right, this is getting frustrating." And like my siblings started calling me Serge. All my friends started calling me Serge. Even my mom calls me Serge,
right.
and they just know it's me.
Uh,
They don't call me by my first name. If my mother calls me by my first name in Spanish, I'm like, even at this age, I'm like, I'm in trouble.
right.
I'm in trouble. I don't care how old you are. I'm scared of my mom. I'll say it.
Yeah, there you go. I had a teacher a long time ago that used to make jokes about that. She said, "You can always tell how big of trouble you're in by the length of your name. The longer your name gets, the more trouble you're in,"
Yep.
kind of thing. So I always thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, pretty spot on there.
Yeah, right on. And so you and I were talking a little bit earlier about your family and like the fact that they're from Mexico.
Yes.
Did you want to kind of get into that a little bit?
So, both my parents came here from Mexico and whatnot. Went through the whole arduous process of becoming citizens and all that. I remember as I was growing up, my father calling the consulate constantly, trying to make sure his paperwork's going and all that. And my father is a man who expects work to be done when it needs to be done. And you can see that in the way I conduct myself and how I handle myself. And it's literally ingrained into me. I just see him wanting to do the right thing to be part of this country and whatnot. Obviously, I was born here. These are my rights.
Hmm.
And he's working so many jobs throughout, and even when we were growing up, I remember seeing my dad was just working. I would never really see him at home because he was always working.
Hmm.
He was always working one job and working another. I remember as a child when we were living in Los Angeles, my mom told us like, "Hey, your dad's downstairs. He has some free time. He came to see you." My dad was driving tow truck for AAA at the time in
Hmm.
LA, and I remember him coming by the apartment we were living at just so he can see us real quick.
Hmm.
And I just remember my father constantly working, even to this day and time. I don't ever think my dad takes a day off. I think it's
Yeah.
more so if the man gets sick, then he's forced to take a day off.
Right.
He'll go on vacation. He'll go down to Mexico, have a great time.
Right.
And but yeah, the man just works, and I absolutely love him and adore him for that. I wish to be half the man he is, at least. And our running joke is that one time my dad's just like, I want some chicken. I want some chicken. And we're just like, okay, we're gonna go down to where are we going? Like Popeyes, like El Pollo Loco, where are we going? And he's like, let's go down to Rocky Point. And we laughed. We did the exact thing. We
Right.
laughed. In like 20 minutes, we were in the car on our way to Rocky Point for chicken.
Nice.
And that's our running joke in the family now. Like, hey, dad wants chicken. Oh, dad's make going to Mexico.
Yeah. Right.
And he does it all the time. I'm like, hey man, you've earned it. I
Right.
ain't no no one has to answer to that. I was like,
Right.
you want to run in Rocky Point or Mexico for whatever?
Mhm.
He's gonna go and do it.
We will accept no substitutes.
That's right. That's right. And there is a difference. Chicken there and chicken here, two different things.
Yeah. Right. So part of the reason why I wanted to get into that is just because now, in particular, is there's such a huge influx of illegal immigrants that are obviously not here seeking salvation or
Asylum.
asylum, whatever. It's like they're military-age men, all by themselves, no family, no women, no children, and they're here to do one thing, and that is to cause chaos in this country. I know a lot of people. I have other friends that are Mexican or at least Mexican descent, and they kind of get this. They're not totally defensive about it, but at the same time, they're trying to keep an open mind because in some cases that's how their family got here, or their
Yeah.
relatives, things like that. And I get that, but you can't deny that this is a major problem. When the number of people coming into this country exceeds the number of people being born in this country, that is a fucking problem,
Very much.
you know. And again, these people are not here just to become integrated and become American citizens and be, flourishing parts of a productive society. That's not why they're here, and anybody who thinks otherwise is really deluded. you know um the fact that our own federal government is suing somebody like Texas saying that you are not allowed to defend your borders, that is a major problem also, and I have real issues with that. Um, I don't know if you have any other thoughts or insights about that or
I get to play both sides of the field here. Obviously, I was born here. This
hmm
is my country. This is where I live. These are
hmm
my rights. I will defend it.
hmm
At the same point in time, my parents did come here legally. But they went through their processes to
hmm
get their green cards, their citizenships, and all that.
hmm
And I have no problem with somebody wanting to better themselves,
hmm
but there is a proper way and time to do it.
hmm
And I think those courses should be followed. I understand there's times where you see refugees are literally fleeing their lands in time of war. Okay, fair enough.
right.
There's only so much you can do here.
hmm
At this point in time, I don't see, aside from the cartel issue, I don't see it being an active war zone, if you will, for a lack of terms.
Right.
But when you look at the different cultures and races coming across that border,
hmm
it's entirely just Mexicans. I mean,
Oh,
we are
yeah.
seeing other nations come through our southern border.
hmm
Um, and I'm just like, I feel a little uneasy about it. At the same point in time, I don't want to be the guy who just automatically hates his people.
Right.
It's their blood runs through my veins.
hmm
I'm American born,
hmm
but I'm of Mexican descent.
Right.
I will defend both countries. That is who I am. It's who
hmm
my family is. At the same point in time, when I see nations like from the Middle East, China coming through our southern border, claiming refugees or and all that, I'm like, I don't believe that. I honestly don't believe anything I'm reading out there.
hmm
As you were alluding to, like, these are military age men coming through here. Why are they coming here?
hmm
What is their intended purpose?
Right.
I mean, when you see people, we'll hark back to when America was becoming a country and they were coming through Ellis Island and whatnot. And that is what literally makes America great. We are just this melting pot of cultures.
hmm
I don't say this is my culture, only you can't be part of it. I'm like, no, I want you to experience it.
hmm
I want you to see what makes us us. At the same point in time, I'd like to be a part of other cultures. I love reading about it. There's times where like my daughter, very big into like Japanese anime stuff,
Right.
and we indulge in that culture and whatnot. There's things she likes to do in that, and I support her in that. There's
hmm
things I want to learn.
Right.
At the same point in time, like I have Italian friends. I mean, for a while there, I was going to my buddy's house. His grandma was making me fat because all the pasta she was making. At the same point in time, I was like,
Right.
there's times we're sitting there, we're yelling at each other, and we're watching TV, and I caught myself doing the typical Italian hand thing. I'm like, and I caught myself. I'm like, did I just do that?
Right. hmm
And that's what I said. That's what makes us great here in this country,
hmm
that we have so many different cultures that we can learn from,
hmm
and this negative feeling towards that, and just everybody's like, no, we're Americans, so we're like, okay, let's play the game. What is an American?
hmm
And people are like, well, I'm like, no, 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 you can say it. You're making it about race.
hmm
I will never say I like it. I'm this, I'm that. I'm an American,
hmm
and that's what makes us us. We come from different backgrounds
Right.
to enjoy this country, these rights that we are given.
hmm
And yes, we should protect them. The fact that our government isn't is a nightmare. When
Right.
we have local departments, local sheriffs, like Sheriff Mark Lamb, I absolutely adore what that man is doing.
Right.
And I hope I get to meet him one day and just get to talk to him.
You and me both.
Yeah, I wholly want to meet that man.
Right.
And you see the videos of him on YouTube and whatnot, and the thing that draws me to him, he's an educator.
hmm
He's not literally just all right, wrap him up, send him to jail. No, he literally wants you to do everything right. He wants to protect this country,
hmm
this state, and I just love that man for it.
hmm
And I just see his sheriffs follow suit. It's like,
Right.
cool. I'm all for that.
hmm
I'm all for due process.
Yeah.
But at the same point in time, like when he like pulls people over and he's like, I don't give tickets. I just educate. I'm like, I'm all for that. You're not trying to be the tyrannical guy
Right.
who has to boast about his status and whatnot and
hmm
play like, oh, I'm the lawmaker. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna argue with you.
Right.
He's like so down, cool, down to earth, and all that. And I got to meet his son. He came into an FFL I was working at, and the guy's the greatest. I'm like you can tell
Yeah.
your father's done a great job.
Right.
And I was like, cool. I I just wholly want to meet that man.
Yeah.
And I have lots of friends on different PD departments and whatnot in different positions,
Hmm.
ranging from patrol officers, SWAT officers, trainers, detectives.
Right.
And I have a full love for them and what they do.
Hmm.
I was like, I mean, you guys are out there literally in probably one of the worst positions to be at in this day and age, unfortunately, because you're being held under a microscope for
Right.
every decision you have to make.
Yeah.
When you literally have seconds to make that choice,
Hmm.
and everyone goes and vilifies you because they had a week, 2 weeks, a month to look over the video
Right.
and just belittle and berate your decisions that you had seconds to make. I was
Hmm.
like, no, that's not right.
Right.
That's not right. You're like, oh, he shot him. Like, well, we need to see what the whole totality of circumstances was.
Right.
I'm like, you can't just be like, oh, he just shot him. Oh, he shot him. Like,
Hmm.
okay, what was everything leading up to it?
Hmm.
What led to that shooting? What led to whatever stabbing? And just people are just like immediately want to be like, oh, the cop shot him. I'm like, well, it's kind of their job to do that, unfortunately,
Yeah.
in a sense, where it's like they will have to end a threat.
Hmm.
And that's another thing we when we're training, and I see people like, yeah, I'm like I'm getting a gun to protect myself. I'm like, perfect. I'm all for it.
Hmm.
But like I said, like regarding the immigration thing, there's a time and way to do it.
Right.
Yes, we don't need a permit to carry openly or concealed here
Hmm.
if you're over 21. But people, I won't call it negligence as far as knowing the laws. They're just uninformed,
Hmm.
and they read on the internet the wrong parts of the internet, and they're like, oh, I don't need this. I'm like, yeah, you do.
Right.
And it's not just simple as point and shoot.
Yeah.
And heaven forbid someone gets into defensive shooting and now
Hmm.
their life is turned upside down,
Right.
and you're locked up going through the trial process, and you're
Hmm.
like, oh, I could defend myself. Yeah,
Hmm.
you're right, you could have.
Yeah.
But was deadly force necessary?
Hmm.
And that is where a lot of people are lacking in training.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, this is kind of what drew me towards becoming an instructor also.
Right.
Um, because at the FFL I was working at, the gun shop I was working at, is where I got to meet Josh.
Hmm.
And he saw how I talked to customers, interacted with them. And there was many times where people came in, they're like, hey, I just see my neighborhood going down in a bad way. I'm like, okay.
Hmm.
Like I feel like I need something to protect myself. I'm like, perfect.
Hmm.
Like and then the ubiquitous thing I hear is like, oh, I need a gun. Okay, I'm not going to tell you no, but let me ask some questions,
Right.
because I want you A, to protect yourself, B, I want you to protect yourself right and legally.
Hmm.
And people are constantly, well, yeah, if they just break into my house, I'm going to shoot them. I'm like, let me stop you right there.
Right.
And
Hmm.
and the thing is, I hear it all the time, and people are like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna kill the guy. I'm like,
Hmm.
well, we don't ever want to say that.
Yeah.
There's, I don't want to kill anybody.
Hmm.
Everyone knows how much I shoot.
Hmm.
Whenever I'm training students on the range, or I'm with our buddies that we're practicing honing our skills.
Hmm.
God forbid I ever have to pull my gun and
Right.
actually use it.
Hmm.
I mean, the last time I actually had to pull my gun out was 2022.
Hmm.
I was actually leaving the gun shop. I was going home to celebrate my dad's birthday, and I had stopped at the gun shop,
Hmm.
or excuse me, at the gas station,
Hmm.
and I was just gassing up my truck. Whenever I was at the gun shop, I still had my what's known as the battle belt and my full loadout. Everyone's like, "Isn't it a bit much?" I'm like, It's more of a deterrent,
Right.
because when you see a guy carrying a gun, three spare mags, a medical kit, flashlight, a multi tool,
Right.
it's not exactly the guy you want to kind of go up against."
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's fine. I don't boast about being this gunfighter and whatnot.
Hmm.
I was like, am I capable? Yes. I mean,
Hmm.
everybody who knows me knows how I shoot and my skills.
Hmm.
They all know it. I don't hide it. I don't boast about it.
Hmm.
But I was going home, and I'm just there gassing out my truck. And where I messed up was I was facing my truck when I gas up.
Mhm.
Normally, I never do that. I always like gas up, put my back towards my truck and gas, so I can have like a 180 peripheral view around me.
Mhm.
And I stick myself in the cab, lock my door so nobody can kind of get through there,
Right.
and I can see everybody comes around. But it was Sunday. I was tired, and I'm facing my truck gassing up. And all of a sudden, this guy walks up to me, and I see him out of the peripheral of my eye. I don't pay any attention to him,
Mhm.
which is my second mistake. And he's like, "Hey, give me 20 bucks." I'm like, "Dude, I'm not giving you anything, dude. Go away." He's
Mhm.
like, "Dude, just give me 20 bucks." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm not giving you anything." I just stood and stared at him. I was
Mhm.
just tired. I'm like, I don't have time for this. And he's like, "Dude, give me 20 bucks." And so he escalated a little bit there.
Yeah.
So that's when I looked up and turned to him, and he had his knife out. And I'm
Mhm.
like, "I have my gun on me. Are you serious?" And I'm looking at him, and you see this guy, and his eyes just like this horrible glazed over look. I'm like, he's strung out right now.
Yeah.
He's legitimately strung out right now.
Mhm.
And I was like, dude, walk away. I'm like, I'm not giving you 20 bucks. Walk away. He's like, dude, give me 20 bucks. I'm like, walk away. This isn't what you want. Walk away.
Mhm.
And he said, dude, just give me it. So he escalated. Therefore, I drew.
Mhm.
And I was in my legal right? Possibly.
Yeah.
That's a discussion somewhere else. And so I have my firearm drawn on him. And I was like, dude, walk away. This isn't what you want. You're not getting 20 bucks.
Mhm.
Walk away. And I won't say what gas station where I was at, but it was a less than favorable neighborhood, and I've seen it. I've grown up in that neighborhood. I slowly see it diminish and whatnot.
Mhm.
And gun drawn. He's there, and sure enough, 2 seconds later, because of the neighborhood and the issues, Phoenix PD just happened to be pulling through the gas station.
Right.
I was like, this isn't gonna end well. I'm literally gonna miss my dad's birthday because of this incident. Right. And because this guy, he was super baby faced. And the father in me, I mean, he reminded me of my son, just how young he looked.
Mhm.
And I was like, could I have shot him? Yeah, oh yeah, dead to
Yeah.
rights. The father in me was like, think about this.
Mhm.
I get the kid's in a bad spot, or he's chasing drugs, chasing that high.
Mhm.
Am I wanting to end this kid's life? I'm like, no, I don't.
Right.
I don't want to end anyone's life. And I just stood there, firearm drawn on him and whatnot. And sure enough, Phoenix PD pulls up, a Artemis guy with a gun out, and they light it up. And this kid's facing me; he doesn't even know what's going on, just
Mhm.
so strung out. And they give commands, and they're like, "Hey, put the gun down." I'm like, "No,
Mhm.
no, that guy's got a knife." He's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, and the kid turned around, saw the cops, dropped the knife. He's like, "Oh, okay."
Right.
And then I put the gun down. I'm like, "No, he's still got the knife at his feet."
Mhm.
I'm like, "You call him away, I'll put my gun down."
Right.
And so I'm like, it's not that I'm not willing to comply. It's just he's really close to me.
Yeah.
And so they walked him away. I holstered my gun and put my lock back on it, put my hands up. I turned around, complied with him and all that. At the end of the day, at the end of the night, I just kind of went through the whole process and whatnot. They're like, okay. I'm like, gave my story to him and whatnot.
Mhm.
And I went to my dad's birthday party. I was like, maybe like an hour late.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, whatever. And I literally had to take a minute before I walked in there because it was still in my face. It was still bothering me. I
Mhm.
actually called one of my friends and I'm like, dude, this is what just happened. I just need somebody to vent to real quick.
Right.
And I was like, he's like, dude, you good? I'm like, will be, yeah. It's
Mhm.
just I couldn't bring myself to end this kid's life just because he was chasing a high.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, we see a lot of that as people that are breaking into houses and stealing things because they are chasing a
Mhm.
high or whatnot.
Mhm.
And it's horrible to think that there are people out there that are ready to end someone's life just because they broke into their house.
Right.
And I was just like, my belongings are not worth taking a life.
Mhm.
I have a hard time with that one.
Mhm.
And people are just so I understand they broke into your house. I get that. That is your castle. That is your home.
Mhm.
You should protect at all rights. But the use of force that we use
Mhm.
should really be dictated there.
Right.
And that in turn takes training and proper knowledge transfer.
Mhm.
Whereas people are like, "Oh, it's a castle law. I can shoot to kill." how much time do you have?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And I was like, oh,
Uh-huh.
okay. And the thing is, like, when I was at the gun shop and I saw a lot of those customers come in,
Hmm.
it was more so I was like, I want you to get rid of that. Get that out of your vernacular.
Hmm.
Don't be like, oh yeah, I'm buying a gun to kill. I'm like, no, I carry a firearm
Hmm.
to defend myself, to
Right.
defend my family. And should something ever happen when we're out and about, you know, the best fight you can have is one that you never have.
Right.
I will grab like me and my kids. We have our egress solutions, whatnot. If it's we can get out of there,
Hmm.
grab my kids. Let's go. It's not a fight I need.
Right.
If that fight is unfortunately close where you can't run away,
Hmm.
I told my daughter, I'm like, if you ever feel me push you on the ground, kick you in a corner, and tell you stay there, you stay there
Right.
till I come back or a cop comes get you.
Hmm.
No one else.
Right.
And dad's gonna go do something that you should never have to see.
Right.
And like I said, I hope to God if she never sees the side of me.
Hmm.
And if the situation comes to like it's here, it's happening right in front of us,
Hmm.
uh, it's gonna happen.
Right.
And I will do what I have to do to protect myself and family and others.
Hmm.
It's not my be like, oh, they're not my family or not my friends. I don't have to protect them. No, this is a society where we
Hmm.
should protect ourselves.
Right.
And I see that a lot. They're like, you should have your obviously your close friends and circles and all that.
Hmm.
I have no problems with that. But at the same point in time, I don't do what I do just to protect my family. I
Hmm.
do what I do to protect us in a society.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, I live here, you live here.
Hmm.
We're all part of this community together. We should protect ourselves.
Hmm.
We should come together. Look at every community that's had a major tragedy just come together.
Hmm.
Like the Las Vegas shooting. You read the whole report. People are grabbing people you'll never meet again. You've never met,
Hmm.
and you're throwing them into your car. You're running to them to the hospital.
Hmm.
That is literally a community coming together,
Right.
and that's how I think we all should be.
Hmm.
But there's so many nitpicky fights that just kind of drive us away from each other.
Hmm.
I'm not a fan of it. Growing up here in Arizona, we moved here in '93, and it just I saw how the communities were then. It was you saw the kids running around, the neighbors knew the neighbors and whatnot. And I'm like, hey, call Tom and Sharon. We're gonna have a party over this weekend. Cool. Everybody come over.
Hmm.
And, that's how it used to be. That's how it should be. Nowadays, yeah, you buy a house, you don't even know the guys next to you.
Hmm.
And you're like, I'm just avoiding them. I don't want to.
Hmm.
It's like, no, I'm not a fan of that. Like my daughter just turned 15 back in November,
Hmm.
and we had her quinceañera, and we invited people from the neighborhood. We even invited the couple down the street that just moved in. They didn't know anybody.
Right.
They just happened to be walking in front of our house as we were
Hmm.
getting ready, everything for them. They're like, "Hey, what's going on?" And we saw their 2-year-old son. His name's Maverick, by the way. I was like,
Nice.
"Yes."
Great name.
Um, and they're like, "Hey, we're new to the neighborhood." And I'm like, "Oh, did you guys move into the house right down the street?" They're like, "Yeah." Like, "Hey, we're having the quinceañera this weekend.
Hmm.
You guys want to come by?" Like, "Oh, we don't know anybody." I'm like, "Just come by.
Hmm.
Just come by." And I had family there, friends that I've have gone and become family and whatnot. Like my friends, Christian and Tristan. My daughter calls them Uncle Christian and Uncle Tristan.
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, you guys are literally family. I'm like, there's no time that you're just like, can I come over? I'm like, yeah, I'm home. Just come over.
Right.
Whatever. I was just like, everybody that was there at the quinceañera, as far as like friends and family, uh,
Hmm.
absolutely means something to me.
Right.
And everybody knows that when I invited them, I purposely invited them for a reason.
Hmm.
And I was just like, man, you guys mean the world to me. I'm like, you guys are my close circle, my community.
Right.
I was like, if I need a shoulder to lean on,
Hmm.
I hope you're there. And no one has let me down. So it was just I just love having that sense of community, and we
Right.
should want to protect each other.
Yeah.
We shouldn't let so many things drive us apart. That's
Hmm.
how things go bad real fast.
Right. So I know that in our country over the last probably 3 to 4 decades, the family unit has been broken down on many levels.
Hmm.
And the worse that gets, the worse the society gets. You just see it repeated over and over again. And working in corrections, not the unit that I work on currently, but at a previous unit, I talked to a lot of the guys there. Um, And if you listen to like kind of the things like where they were at the time when they were doing the things they were doing, a lot of them were didn't have fathers, didn't have like any real parents that were like kind of that cared about what they were doing or
Yeah.
where they were at. A lot of them got connected with drugs, alcohol, and things like that that they used, and they allowed that to make really poor decisions for them. You know, they were robbing stores, they were robbing people, they were committing crimes and things that ultimately, if they had had a better family structure, even a better support structure from their community, probably never would have been in those positions in the first place.
I totally agree with
And
that.
it's really easy to look at them. They're wearing orange, they're convicts, they're in prison, you know, but and this is not always the case because I know because I've worked everything from absolute max security to, level three of sex offenders, you know, there's a gambit in between. They're the guys that are like, these are the worst of the worst. They're never going to be anything other than what they are. There's no point in time where they're going to be able to be a functioning part of our society. No matter how much rehabilitation you put them through, they are who they are. Okay. Same thing with sex offenders, the pedophiles and, you know, people that have done some of the things that they've done, which I'm not going to get into. There's no way they're going to ever stop being that. You're not going to rehabilitate them. You're not going to change their perception of the world and what they want and what they think is okay. Okay. But there is a different segment of people that just happened to make mistakes. And at some point, they can atone for that and become better people. If they change their environment, they change their habits, they find a better way to be more civil and be a part of our community. Okay. With all of that being said, and I'm not a religious person, I never have been, but I really do believe, and the older I get, the more I kind of come to realize this, that we are all human beings. We all have a place on this earth. We should be brothers and sisters at the most fundamental level. That's what we are. Okay. And it's really hard to see, you know, from where I grew up, the way things were and the way they are now, how much difference there is. Um, I've never seen a point in history where the government worked so hard to divide our country on so many levels, went out of its way to segregate people and to elevate the lowest people in our community to the highest standard by claiming victimhood. And somehow that has become a celebrated thing. It's like that's the actual reason why I started this podcast. Because the non-victim nation, that shouldn't be the goal of people. You shouldn't want to live your life to be a victim and be celebrated for being a weakling.
Hmm.
That's just not okay. You know, and so we need to bring ourselves back together. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to find religion because that's not always the answer, but they need to at least have that idea in their head that not everybody in the world is your enemy. Not everybody's your best friend, but at least they're people you can coexist with, you know. And on a fundamental level, if they're doing what they're doing and it makes them happy, as long as it's not bothering you or harming anybody else, well, so be it. You know, if
Let
you,
bygones be bygones.
yeah, it's just we need to learn to get along and learn to tolerate each other because we're all in this together,
Hmm.
especially being a part of this country and watching it fall apart the way that it is. We're systematically following all of the roads to destruction that every other country has before us. I know there's a big meme war kind of thing going on about we compare ourselves to Rome, to the Roman Empire,
Hmm.
but it's really hard to like look at history and not see the
The
same things
cycle's
happening.
repeating.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you know. And then kind of on the other thing that you talked about, people have this perception in their head because they watch too much TV, too many movies, and they just think that I'm gonna like kill somebody and that's gonna be totally okay. It's like you have no idea what it is to take another person's life.
Yeah.
You have no idea how that's going to affect you. You have no idea the ramifications that come after that.
Yeah.
Even if you are totally justified, 100%, doesn't mean the law is going to see it that way. Kyle Rittenhouse was a perfect example of that. Whether he should have been in the situation that he was in from the beginning is is something we can debate. But the fact that he was justified in the shootings that he did,
Hmm.
trying to protect his own life, nobody can argue that. You know, they proved it in court without any. without any doubt.
And
He was
even
correct.
now, look at people's opinion of him. They're like, "Oh, he's guilty. He's guilty. He's guilty." I'm like,
Right.
and this is how it starts. Okay.
Yeah. But again, like if you find yourself in a situation where you actually have to shoot somebody, and that person dies, there's all kinds of consequences that you're not thinking about further down the road,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And kind of like the same idea that like people when they say I'm going to buy a gun so that I can shoot people, that's the same thought process as I'm going to take up boxing so I can just walk around knocking people out. That's a stupid way to think of it,
It is.
and it's ridiculous to a point of being laughable. Nobody says that. Nobody walks into a boxing gym and says, I want to learn to box just so I can walk around knocking people out.
Yeah.
That would be retarded and probably get kicked out of the gym.
Probably. And
You
you,
know?
you guys have heard me joke about it and say it and whatnot. It's literally the whole Spider-Man thing, all or Ben Parker. It was great power comes great responsibility.
Right.
Just because you can own a firearm,
Hmm.
I don't think a lot of people should.
Hmm.
And just the way their demeanor and how they conduct themselves. So I was like, this is not a force multiplier I believe some people should have. But I mean, it's our God given right.
Hmm.
So who am I to say anything regarding that? But at the same point in time, I was like, uh, and the thing is, like, when I'm teaching my kids how to shoot and whatnot, the first time I took my son out shooting my AR-15, and he was excited. He's grew up playing Call of Duty and whatnot, and we're on the range and whatnot. And I put the rifle down, chamber open, and magazine out. And immediately I put it down. And I want to see what his reaction, see if he would grab it for it.
Hmm.
And he did in true teenager form and whatnot. He's excited. I get it. I was too. But I remember he put his hand on the handrail on the handguard, and I immediately grabbed my hand over him, and I gripped onto his hand, and I kind of like gave some good pressure on it, so he could understand severity of what he was about to do.
Hmm.
I told him, understand this: we are here to shoot, we are have fun,
Hmm.
but at the same point in time, realize the moment you pull that trigger, you can't take that round back.
Hmm.
Whatever happens, you are responsible for.
Hmm.
Heaven forbid you take a life, you can't bring that back.
Right.
I don't care how many times you want to click your heels and rub the genie lamp, it's not going to happen.
Hmm.
And you need to be aware of that. You need to have that your first and foremost thought
Hmm.
whenever you decide to pull that firearm and you decide to pull that trigger. That conscious decision should be it's literally it's go time. This needs to happen, not just
Right.
oh I was in fear for my life. Mm, no,
Right.
because you have to articulate that. You have to be able to articulate that.
Hmm.
You can't just simply be like, oh well, I'm in fear for my life, so I shot.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean you're right.
Right.
And a lot of people have a hard time grasping that fact.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I call it the Hollywood effect. And I know you guys have heard me say that many times.
Hmm.
And it was like, oh, I saw it in the movies. That's the worst, probably the last thing you want to say
Right.
going into a court of law. Like, oh, I saw it in the movies.
Hmm.
Or just people like, oh, fuck around and find out. I'm like, you have fun with that. Good luck with that, buddy.
Right.
And you let me know how that goes, and
Hmm.
I'll come visit you. And I just feel that some people should have a little more training.
Hmm.
Even as far as taking a simple concealed weapons course, just simple knowledge transfer could literally open your eyes
Hmm.
into how much responsibility there is to owning a firearm, carrying a firearm, using a firearm,
Hmm.
and knowing those laws and what goes into that. And people think like, oh, well, they see us. I mean, between you, me, the other guys, and whatnot. Yeah, well, we love our guns,
Hmm.
and we're constantly practicing,
Hmm.
constantly. I
Yeah.
mean, this last time I did the Prevail defensive shooting qualification back at the beginning of the month, I went through like probably 200 some rounds of hollow points, and we all know hollow points aren't cheap,
Right.
but every time I went up, I missed a shot. I missed a shot. I missed a shot. And was it still on the body? Yes.
Hmm.
Was it where it was dictated? No. So
Hmm.
in that training, I was like, yeah, you have to be 100% spot on. You
Right.
can't miss. And everyone knows me. I'm laughing. I'm joking all the time.
Right.
I have no problem with that. That day, I was visibly frustrated. I actually did give up. I legitimately did give up. I actually packed up my gun and I was like, dude, I can't do this. Like I can't do this today. I'm missing. I just can't do it. I
Mhm.
literally got in my own head. And we sat there for like 10, 15 minutes and just like talked about it. Like, hey, we're going again. And I was like, oh, we're going again. I'm like, okay. I had a chance to cool down, and I was like, all right, let's do it.
Right.
And on the last shooting session of the day, I actually passed. And I shown you guys the picture on my Instagram and
Mhm.
whatnot. Me standing there next to target. I'm smiling. I'm excited.
Right.
And Josh from Guardian Training, who is a good friend of mine, good mentor. I was there with him,
Mhm.
and he'll tell you the same exact same thing. Sees me joking, sees me fine. That's probably the first time he's seen me actually visibly frustrated and angry like that.
Right.
And it normally doesn't happen to me anymore.
Mhm.
I'm just like, and it was literally I got in my own head.
Mhm.
But I understood, this is a program that I need to be 100% spot on.
Mhm.
I literally have to be perfect in the shooting qual. And I don't need everybody to be me in
Mhm.
the way I train or the way we train and whatnot,
Right.
but everyone should have some training.
Mhm.
I see people that will come out to the range and open their gun box. Oh hey, what do you got? They're like, oh, I bought this Glock 19. I'm like, oh cool. When'd you get it? He's like, oh, like a year ago. I'm like, okay, cool. This is my first time shooting it. Wow. Okay.
So I had a thought about that. Imagine for a second that you are 16 years old. You've just taken your very first driving test and you barely passed, but you passed. So you got a driver's license now.
That was me
And,
actually.
okay. So, but now imagine I'm going to take that license, I'm going to stick it in a drawer somewhere, and I'm not going to drive for 20 years, 5 years, whatever the time frame is. It's like, and then one day I decide, you know what? I need to go drive. I'm going to get in this car now. I'm going to go drive without any practice in between or any training about how to drive in any circumstance. It's like, how well are you going to do with that?
Yeah. Like, I have
You
a
know?
license. I can drive.
Yeah.
We still
It's
hear
like,
people say that today.
right. Or the same idea. People get wrapped in this thought process of they think that because they've gotten to the bare minimum of something,
Hmm.
that means that they're okay, that they're good.
Yeah.
I bought a gun. I'm safe now.
I'm ready to go.
It's like
Ready for anything.
you've never fired the fucking thing. You don't know
Yeah.
anything about how to manipulate it, how to clear stoppages, like anything that could happen,
Yeah.
right? And you also don't know if you can actually hit the target you're shooting at.
Yeah.
You know,
The what's known as the Dunning-Kruger effect.
right?
Yeah. You think you're better than you are than you actually are.
Yeah.
And I tell the same thing when I had customers come into the shop. They're like, oh, like my buddy has this staccato. I'm like, oh cool. I love staccatos.
Right.
I'm so ready to buy one. And I'm like, dude, great gun. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna go out there and shoot competitions with them. I'm like, okay. Oh, like, and I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, cool. This guy's shot before.
Uh-huh.
Not a lot of people are typically going out for staccato as the first gun.
Right.
And he's all like, oh, yeah, I was like, I've never shot before. Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
Um, start asking questions. He's like, oh yeah, you're sure gonna go out there and shoot with the guys.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, okay, well, let me play devil's advocate real quick.
Right.
And we go through the whole questions. I'm like, look, it's just the same thing. It's like I could give you a Ferrari and tell you, hey, go out there and win a race. Like, well, and I mean, I want any training. Exactly.
Right.
It's like I get them to relate to it on it's really a case by case basis
Mhm.
on really who it is. But whenever I give that analogy there, that I'm like, hey, here's a Ferrari, go win an F1 race,
Mhm.
dude. Those guys are training constantly. So are we.
Yeah. Right.
So are we constantly.
Yeah.
I was like, well, it's expensive. It's expensive if you don't train.
Mhm.
Think about it. You take that shot and you miss
Yeah.
and you hit somebody.
Mhm.
That's you. You're responsible for it. You're going to jail for that.
Yeah.
More than likely, you are. And
Mhm.
they're like, well, I did it in good faith. A lot of things are done in good faith.
The road to damnation is paved with good intentions.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter what you meant to do. It only matters what you did do,
Yeah,
you know? So, um, like Guardian has the simulator so they can do the use of force,
yeah. We have our use of force
right?
simulator.
Which is the most incredible tool in my opinion. And I think that even though I don't agree with the idea of legislating mandatory training, I
Hmm.
think that's completely wrong. I do believe everybody should go through this training. And I think that they should go through that one very specifically because it is the closest that you're ever going to get to a real life shoot incident without actually having to shoot. And the part of the reason why I say that is because I've seen people go through that and hit a brick wall of a moral dilemma about whether or not they're supposed to shoot or not. Their life is literally in jeopardy, and there's some part of their mind that still says this is wrong, and they don't actually take the shot. Okay? You need to know that. Again, you can't just have the gun and assume that it's all going to work out the way that it's supposed to.
Yeah.
You need to know what's going to happen in that situation so you can be mentally prepared for it and, proficient, like technically proficient in order to deal with the
Mhm.
situation. If you don't have those components, at some level you're going to fail.
And pretty much all of what you're gonna
Yeah,
fail. The only thing you're not gonna fail at is hitting something.
right,
Well, whether it's the intended or unintended thing you wanna hit is the real question.
right.
And I love seeing students go through that, like you said, the moral dilemmas. I love seeing the moral dilemmas and the little body cues that they give off.
Hmm.
And the best thing about that use of force simulator is we have 2 cameras on you,
Hmm.
and we play it back afterwards, and we show
Right.
you exactly I'm like, "Hey, this is what you're doing." I remember one person in particular, I'm gonna leave him unnamed, young man, probably was about 22, 23.
Hmm.
Said he was going to school to be a lawyer and whatnot.
Yeah.
And he said, "Man, okay, what are you in school for?" He's like, "Well, I like to be a Second Amendment lawyer and all." It's like, "I want to be more familiar with these things." I'm like,
Hmm.
"Perfect. Let's get you in there."
Right.
And of course, we check your heart rate beforehand, see where you're at, see how cool, relaxed you are,
Hmm.
and then we check you afterwards. This gentleman came in. He was like 62, so low 60 beats per minute. And we gave him a scenario where he's in a restaurant, bumps into somebody and whatnot. And the guy gets up, becomes belligerent and whatnot, grabs, I believe it was like a butter knife off the table. And the student is just like telling, like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. As she's being belligerent and whatnot. And at one point in time, our student decides to be like, okay, I'm scared, and starts shooting. Mind you,
Hmm.
the gun jammed 3 times on him.
Wow.
He cleared the gun 3 times,
Uh-huh.
got back in the proverbial fight, if you will, and kept shooting.
Uh-huh.
And at the end of the scenario, we're like, all right, tell us what happened. Just cool and calm. And we check his heartbeat. He's like 150, 160. This kid panicked. This
Right.
kid panicked.
Right.
And we're like, hey, how many times did you shoot? He's like, 4. I'm like, really? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
He's like, I fired 4 shots. And he's like, dude, you fired like 14, 15. You emptied the magazine.
Wow.
And we're like, hey, what happened to the gun? And he's like, well, I was in fear for my life. And so I started shooting. I'm like, no, no, no. What actually physically happened to the gun?
Uh-huh.
He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, what happened to the gun? He's like, I don't get it. Like, the gun jammed on you 3 times. He's like, no, it didn't. I was like, yeah, it did. And so we played the camera back from the other angle, and you see him jam. You see him going through the motion, clearing it, and getting back in. It jams, and he's like clearing it. And he did it on 3 separate occasions. He's like, I don't remember doing that.
Yeah.
I don't remember doing that. I'm like, well, camera does.
Right.
And we asked him, I'm like, hey, how many people were behind the target you were shooting at? He's like, there's nobody back there. Pulled back up. There's 4 people back there. Barely missed one.
Wow.
I'm like, if you hit him, you would have been responsible for that. And yeah, he was humbled to say the
Yeah.
least. And I love seeing students come through that, and we give them different scenarios and whatnot. I'm not gonna give away all the scenarios. It's gonna be a secret for everybody to come and find out.
Right.
But it's just like I've seen the whole gambit of people come in, where it's like I've seen lawyers, I've seen corporation bigwigs, even mothers from church,
Hmm.
and like you were saying, the moral dilemma is there. The
Hmm.
moral dilemma is real. I understand that it's like this isn't what we're taught. We're not taught to take a life.
Right.
But unfortunately, in this growing society and day and age, unfortunately, it's more and more of a reality sometimes, and
Hmm.
it's horrible that we've come to that.
Right.
And you see them like I had one lady. She's just like wouldn't draw the gun. Like we put her in like a bad scenario. We put her in 3 different scenarios.
Hmm.
It was about 3 or 4 actually, and by the third one, she was actually starting to draw, and on the fourth and final one, she actually shot.
Wow.
And you see her visibly shaken by it
Hmm.
that she had to do that.
Hmm.
Excuse me. And she's just standing there. I'm like, no, don't go anywhere. Let's talk about it.
Hmm.
And she's physically just like, I shot somebody. Sure did.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Hmm.
And and even it was just simulation. You see how much it affected her.
Right.
And she's like, at the end of it, she's like, thank you for this. Actually, she's the mother of a former student. Now I think about it. And so she's just like, I don't like this. I'm like, none of us do.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't walk around and be like, hey, let's get in a gunfight. Let's
Right.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you ready? You ready? I got a gun. You got a gun? Let's go.
Hmm.
We don't walk around like that.
Hmm.
And the thing is, like, we see guys who actually do walk around like that.
Hmm.
I'm like, we don't flaunt this around. This isn't something that should be openly celebrated like that and openly like I'm like I'm a tough guy. I'm like,
Right.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just like, you're making yourself the target at that point in
Yeah.
time.
So I'll give you a different example of that because I work in prison. There are times when we're either working on perimeter or we go to take inmates to the hospital. So that requires two officers, both of which are armed. Okay. So at no point in any of that process do we as the officers think, oh, wow, I get to shoot a guy today. You know, that's not what we're there for. We're there to protect the people that work in the hospital. We're there to protect ourselves. And then we're there to protect the inmate should anything happen,
Hmm.
with him. Right. So again, this goes back to the whole mental process. People can't enter into this thinking that that's the goal. That's never why we do it. It's there as a last resort, and it has to be a last resort. You know, especially like in the scenario where we're in a hospital and there's an inmate who's trying to make an escape. I'm going to do what I need to do to stop that inmate, but that doesn't mean I'm going to resort to my firearm first thing because there are other people there. You have innocent people that are around.
People,
You know,
other medical supplies that are flammable.
yeah,
Should that shot miss
right,
in a high stress situation, it's a high probability. It
yeah.
really is.
And like one of the rules that we learn is be aware of your target and what's beyond it,
And around it.
you know. But the truth of that is that you are responsible for every bullet that leaves that gun
Hmm.
until it stops moving.
Yeah.
Okay. Wherever that is, that's when your liability stops. Is like, if you shot and hit a wall and didn't hit anybody, okay. You shot and it hit somebody, you're
You're
responsible. It
answering
doesn't
for that.
matter what your intention was.
Yeah.
you know? So if it ricochets and hits something else, if it hits something like you said that's flammable and that explodes, it causes some other incident, or other injury, you're responsible for that too, you know?
Hmm.
You have to be aware of those things and that has to be part of the mental process. So again, you can't just immediately go, that's my first response. Even inside the prisons where we're not allowed to use firearms, we have to use less than lethal options, right?
Hmm.
So we're allowed to use tasers, we can use pepper spray, right? That doesn't mean every time an inmate gets out of line that's the first thing we're reaching for.
Yeah.
Okay. We have other things that we can, work with. Our presence is a big one. That's our first kind of step, right? Our communication is the biggest one we have. How do you de-escalate a situation so that you don't have to resort to that? You know? And again, that is the last resort. That's the thing that happens when there is no other alternative. Okay. People need to adopt that thought process. You're doing something to protect yourself, yes, as a last resort. Best fight in the whole world, just like you said, is the one that you don't get into. And if you can avoid that, by all means, you should. You
I,
know,
I, I, like I said, I do wholly believe that, but some people are just like, God, I'm ready to get in this fight. I'm ready to get in this fight. I'm like, I don't. I've told my customers at the gun shop I used to work at. I'm like, at the end of the day, I want to go sleep in my own bed.
right?
Jimmy, I want to go sleep in my own bed.
Hmm.
You have to make those decisions, however hard they may be, to make sure that happens. I was like, I have my kids. I have my dog. At the same point in time, I was like, yeah, I want to go home. Like I get home and like I want to see my daughter, my dog run at me.
Right,
I don't want to see them come at me through a set of bars or a glass window.
right.
It's not what I want.
Hmm.
Ultimately, no, that's not what I want. Should I ever have to make the choice to defend myself and protect my family? Yeah, I'll do that.
Hmm.
I have no qualms about that.
Right.
But at the same point in time, it's like we go through so much training to ensure that us as instructors, or even us as I won't use the word gunfighter, but this is we train ourselves to be like, okay, same point in time, I was like, I'm not reaching for my gun, like, oh, car backfired, gun. No. It's
Acorn in the
it's it
windshield.
yeah. Oh, the acorn. We're not gonna get into that acorn. Oh man, the acorn. Um, is just more so it's like it's being able to understand the situation you're in
Mhm.
and being able to have that thought process
Right,
to properly go through it and assess the situation on what needs to be done.
right.
Was simple like, hey, was it a car accident?
Yeah,
Actually a gunshot?
right.
I think, or somebody having a
Hmm.
altercation that I'm too close to,
Hmm.
that I have to escape that situation.
Right.
It's being able to have that mental capacity to be able to react and understand the situation you're in that
Hmm.
I do see a lot of people lack.
Hmm.
And I want them to be better about it,
Right.
whether that's them doing their own training at home, seeking training. I just feel that it's like everyone needs a little more in that
Hmm.
just to be making better decisions.
Hmm. So, kind of on that point, and this is something that I think about kind of as a separate conversation, but it fits in with what we're talking about now, is you as a parent and you have children and you're teaching them about firearms. You're not teaching them just about safety. At some point, you have to have discussions about these sorts of things, about what's right, what's wrong, and when it's okay to do those sorts of things.
Hmm.
Not just with firearms, but any use of force that they might have to employ
Yeah,
at some point. If your kids practice jujitsu, you're not going to encourage them just to go choke people out for because they can,
yeah.
you know. So from your perspective, like being a parent, it's like how do you translate those things to kids?
My kids being older and all that. I said my daughter's 15, my son is 19. I unfortunately I don't sugarcoat it for them.
Hmm.
I don't. My daughter has caught me. There's times where I'll watch body cam video and we'll go through it and see a decision making and whatnot. And she's actually watched it with me.
Hmm.
I was like, are you sure this isn't something I want you to watch? She's like, I'm like, I'll watch one. I'm like, okay. And she saw, unfortunately, the New Mexico officer that was stabbed not too long ago.
Hmm.
And he just calmly walked up to the guy and whatnot, and the guy pulled out a knife, stabbed the officer. And my daughter was just like taken back. She's like, "What happened?" I'm like, "He was just stabbed in the neck area."
Hmm.
And shortly after he passes away, she's like, "But it happened so fast." I'm like, That's how it happens."
Right.
I'm like, "That's literally how it happens." And I said she's caught me watching a couple other body cam videos, and she's like, "It was over so fast." I'm like, "That's all it takes.
Hmm.
That's literally all it takes."
Right.
I was like, and she's seen situations that turn from a simple traffic stop to an officer being shot, the suspect being killed, and whatnot. She's like, "Oh my god!" I'm like, "That's the reality of it, baby.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's the reality of it.
Hmm.
You don't see a lot of that because obviously we make choices to stay away from areas like that and whatnot. Obviously, we
Right.
we all know areas to go to and where to keep our kids situated and whatnot.
Hmm.
It's like cool." And I was just like, and it's just a bad point in time. I was like, understand when you get old enough, you're gonna want to go out with your friends.
Hmm.
And obviously, you're still a minor, and I can defend you as much as I can.
Right.
At the end of the day, when you're older, you start going out on your own. As a father, I was like, it scares the crap out of me. Like, I won't be there to protect them,
Hmm.
and I can only do so much to make sure they're ready for it. And I feel that's somewhat necessary to show them a little bit of the ugly side. Like this is what could happen.
Hmm.
I was like, you hear about it. I'm like, honey, you're a girl. I joke around with her. I'm like, honey, you got a milk box face. And she's like, "What's a milk box face?" Like all the kids that get kidnapped before their faces ended up on a milk box. And she's like, "Oh my honey, you got a milk box face. I'm sorry, but you do." I'm like, You're gonna be an easy target that they're gonna want to take you." I'm
Uh-huh.
like, "Baby, you're beautiful, you're pretty, but
Yeah.
they got their eyes on you."
Right.
And at the same point in time, I was like, "All right, cool." Like my daughter practices a little bit of jujitsu with me. She's very into knife edged weapons, which is a little scary for me. More scary for the boys that decide to date her.
Right.
Hopefully, there's none. Um, but she's getting training. I'm like,
Hmm.
understand. I can only do so much
Hmm.
to have you ready, but at the same point in time, I still want you to have a childhood. I still want you to enjoy yourself.
Right.
You shouldn't have to live in fear that every time you go out the door, someone's going to try and attack you. Someone's going to try and rape you. No, you should go through life,
Right.
but at the same point in time, you should be prepared to defend yourself.
Hmm.
Not constantly walk around that super macho. I'm like, mess with me, I dare you.
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
walk around like that. My kids know I'm always being goofy. Even with my daughter, you'll probably see me with painted nails and makeup sometimes.
Okay.
I'm a girl dad,
Hmm.
but at the same point in time, I'm very capable of a lot of things.
Hmm.
And she sees it. She sees me shoot, and she's like, "Okay." I'm like, "Yeah." Hopefully, dad never has to use it, but
Right.
same point in time, I'm gonna do what I can to make sure you are prepared to defend yourself out there in the real world. And show you enough life skills that the moment you decide to leave the nest, whatnot, that you're like, okay, I'm gonna figure this out. But at the same point in time, I'm still in this world.
Right.
I'm still able to help her out.
Yeah.
I mean, even now, there's still times my parents help me out.
Hmm.
And it's just, it may be the most minuscule little things, but I'm
Yeah.
just like, my parents are still here.
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, I just got to make sure they're prepared.
Yeah. So part of the reason why I brought that up is because like our education system is absolute garbage.
Dog shit.
Okay. And I think that it A needs to be completely be overhauled. Like, um, but there are lots of things like the Apogee schools that are presenting uh, David Bedreau, I believe, or Matt Bedreau is his name, who created that whole system, and it's a different way of educating children and teaching them things that they should know instead of how to like just train people to be worker bees
Yeah.
and follow the rules of society. Okay,
Hmm.
that aside, I think that just like all of the other stuff that we've talked about, the getting more training, some of that at least has to reside with parents. They have to be the first line that teaches kids about these sorts of things so they're not walking into the world blind about what could happen. Because just like you said, she was startled about how fast that could happen. It's like that really is the reality. And unfortunately, there are so many things that are, all of our social media, all of our mainstream media, all of these things that are in place telling us all that we should believe in a fantasy world that doesn't exist. That's not okay. Okay. It is incumbent upon us as parents to actually prepare our children for the world as it is, not as we hope that it will be,
Yeah.
you know? And so, as much as I think that people that decide that they want to take up any sort of self defense, whether that's martial arts, carrying a firearm, whatever it is, it's excellent that they want to take on that responsibility. They need to have the experience to back it up.
Hmm.
And again, I don't think that that should be the very first time that they're exposed to those things. Going through that use of force simulator shouldn't be the very first time they run into a moral dilemma. Because at that point, if this was a real life scenario, it's a little too late,
Yeah.
you know? So I think that in general, parents need to do a better job of preparing their children.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I said we don't need to show them the complete ugly side.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, there's parts of the world that are experiencing the ugly side,
Yeah.
but us as parents here, we can do so much to help them along with that.
Hmm.
And don't get me wrong, my daughter loves Barbie and pink this, pink that, and makeup, and wants a whole new vanity and all that fun jazz. I'm like, that's fine. Do your
Right.
thing. Do your thing.
Yeah.
I want you to enjoy that life because you're only a child once.
Right.
You should enjoy it.
Hmm.
Nothing should take that away from you. But at the same point in time, when you become an adult and you're no longer filtered to the ugliness of life, you should be like, all right, let's go. Instead
Right.
of the, oh God, those guys just yelled at each other.
Hmm.
If that's the worst thing that you think is going to happen to you,
Yeah.
a rude awakening.
Right.
The case in point to that, my daughter, she has her own stop the bleed kit
Hmm.
in her backpack. I uh
Hmm.
I actually had a little truncated stop the bleed kit, course with her at home
Hmm.
where she actually applied tourniquets to me and whatnot. And we recently had our open house over at our Guardian headquarters
Hmm.
where we had mini classes. My daughter was actually in attendance for my stop the bleed course there,
Nice.
where she actually got to apply more tourniquets to herself
Hmm.
and practice packing wounds and whatnot. And she's standing there and she's at the end of the day, she's like, that was really awesome. I'm like, baby, that was the short course.
Right.
That's not everything we teach.
Hmm.
And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, there's much more to that I didn't go through. Just there was too many people there
Right.
to go through the entire course and whatnot. And
Hmm.
she's super intrigued and whatnot. And I said, so she's got her own little stop the bleed course kit in her backpack with her.
Hmm.
A tourniquet, chest seals, everything that we used, we
Hmm.
practiced.
Right.
And one thing, she has grandparents. Obviously, my parents, parents on her mother's side, who are older and whatnot. And she's like, well, what about CPR and stuff like that? Like, what if something happens to Grandpa? And I'm over there. I'm like, okay, well, I want you to be prepared. And
Right.
one of the tools in my medical kit is my AED, my defibrillator.
Mhm. Right.
And the nice beauty thing about this brand right here by Vive is they actually have a training mode also.
Okay.
You actually take out the actual shocking pads and put in training pads,
Hmm.
and it actually allows you to go through the whole motions where you will pull the training pads out, place them on the dummy and whatnot, and it goes through the motions.
Hmm.
Tells you shocking patient in 3, 2, 1,
Hmm.
shock delivered, begin CPR, and it gives you a rhythm to go to.
Hmm.
That way, you're not trying to think about it. I kind of get it. Not everybody's like thinking the song like "Staying Alive" and just going
Right.
through the beats and whatnot. The AED actually gives you the beat and all that, so you can focus more on that.
Hmm.
So, and the reason why I tell people in my stop to bleed course or any courses, because I've actually been stopped in public and like people are like, "You have an AED with you?" I'm like, "I do."
Hmm.
And I openly tell them, I was like, "Hey, I was when I was younger, I was like 14 or 15, that we were out to dinner and there was this older gentleman who had a sudden cardiac episode, and no one there knew CPR.
Mm.
No one there. Like everyone's like, who knows CPR? He's like, oh, I think you push here and whatnot. And in the back of my head, and I say it like this in class, I'm like, we need those shocky paddle thingies.
Right.
It's literally how I put it. To shock them, we need something like that.
Right.
And 'cause I never seen it in a TV show that they shocked them.
Hmm.
Like we need one of those, but I'm like, but we're not at a hospital. And unfortunately, the gentleman did pass away, and that kind of bothered me for a while. I was like, no one knew how to do anything,
Right.
even something as basic as CPR,
Hmm.
and no one was able to help any countermeasures or first line measures till first responders arrived, and it genuinely did bother me,
Hmm.
and it's kind of always been in the back of my head, still is. And then when I found out this company Avive does their AEDs in such a small portable package,
Hmm.
I was like, I'm gonna get one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get one. And so I do. I carry it with me basically everywhere I go, whether it's like my day job on the weekends with my kids or whatnot. If I'm out with friends, it's near me. It's
Hmm.
close by.
Right.
We're out hiking and whatnot. It's with me.
Hmm.
It's always with me. And my two backpacks I carry this in have a little AED patch on there.
Hmm.
So I'm like, if someone just passed by and they're like, oh hey, he's got one, and heaven forbid someone's like, oh he's having a heart attack. Like wait, there's a guy here.
Right.
If 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 all my training and preparedness helps save at least one life,
Hmm.
it's worth it.
Hmm.
No matter how much time, money spent in training and being away from my family and honing my skills, if I can at least help save one life,
Hmm.
everything I've done is absolutely worth it.
That's awesome. So, another part of why I wanted to have you on the podcast is, and we're going to go down a completely different path now. I want you to show your arm here real quick.
Oh, my Mythosaur.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to get into like a little bit of a nerd conversation.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
So can you talk about that a little bit and like why you got that there?
So everyone in my family and my close friends know I'm a big Star Wars nerd.
Mhm.
I remember watching the episode 4 for the first time, and just living in this fantasy land galaxy far, far away,
Right.
and it just drew me into that. And I was like, oh, this is awesome, awesome, and just learning about all the different creatures and whatnot throughout the series and whatnot. And then I'm big into comic books, and I started reading about Mandalorians and whatnot,
Hmm.
and the culture they live in, such a warrior culture. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. I saw that the Mythosaur was their insignia. And I was like, that's awesome. But at the same point in time, in relating to what I do as basically my career now, whether it's being a firearm instructor or the firearms manufacturer I work at,
Hmm.
it more so really resonated with me. I'm like, this is the kind of the culture I want.
Hmm.
And the funny part is, more and more students I teach and whatnot actually have the Mythosaur tattoo.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's just having that planned feeling of being prepared and whatnot.
Hmm.
Obviously, yeah, they're bounty hunters or whatnot and whatnot. But I'm just like, I love how close knit they are. Like, even their kids, they
Hmm.
they teach their kids, but
Right.
they're not always walking around and be like, okay, go get in that fight, go get in that fight. It's like
Right.
we teach you to be prepared. I was like, love it.
Hmm.
So it kept resonating with me. I was like, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it.
Yeah.
I'm totally gonna get it.
Yeah.
And obviously, then the Mandalorian show came out, and I'm like, oh god, I'm gonna be ousted as like, oh, you're just that hype guy. I'm like, I am a hype guy. I love Star Wars.
Yeah.
Totally love Star Wars. One year for one of my birthdays, I got like 6 lightsabers for 1 year.
Right.
I still have them.
Sweet.
But I was just like, I'm like, it's just like the inner nerd in me. I was
Hmm.
like, it's just you're transported to, like I said, a world far, far away,
Hmm.
and there's so much there to learn.
Yeah.
It was just like, I'm like, all right, cool. I
Hmm.
actually recently went to the Phoenix Symphony because they were playing episode 4 with the symphony playing the whole score of it. I
Right.
was sitting there like, I'm gonna say like a fat kid eating cake. I was like, I'm so excited.
Right.
I'm just like, bum, 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 bum.
Yeah.
And like the symphony is there going with me. I'm like, this is better than surround sound.
Yeah. Right.
So I was just having the time of my life. I was like, yes.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's why I got it. It does resonate with me as far as a lot of things I do, my nerdiness and whatnot.
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong, I got other tattoos also that are like some is like comic book nerds. Um, I have a baby calf on my calf. Yeah, it's a little cartoon Callie and piece of grass. A little bubble says moo.
Yeah.
Yeah, got that
Nice.
on my left leg. Got that for my daughter because I call her my little moo.
Right.
And it's just a little cute cartoon cow.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, yeah, all right, cool.
Right.
I got my Friday 13 tattoo of a little shark. And there was like, why? I'm like, Friday 13. I didn't need a reason. I was like,
Yeah.
I want that one. I
Right.
mean, granted, I do love Shark Week. I
Hmm.
watch it every year.
Yeah.
I was like, take the great white shark. Take it.
There you go.
I got a couple other. I have like 4 Bible verses on my arms. That kind of, if you read them, it kind of like yeah, it kind of features the duality of man, if you will.
Hmm.
One thinks it's this kind of like over here, like contradicting. I'm like, that's kind of our world.
Right.
It's a bit contradictory at times, and you're just like, I don't get it. I'm like, that's why it's there.
Right.
And be like, oh, okay, all right. I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, that's what it is. What it is.
Yeah. So part of the reason why I brought that up is because I know that you're really into that, and I'm really a huge Star Wars nerd. I love Star Wars. I saw Episode 4, which was the original Star
Hmm.
Wars movie, when I was 7 years old, and I actually saw it twice in theater, which back then was saying a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. And I absolutely loved that film. I loved everything about Star Wars, minus some of the sequels and things that came out, but just the overall story arc, especially with Luke Skywalker. Part of the thing that I talk about in the podcast is that, the story of your life is being written right now, and that you are the hero of the story, right?
Hmm.
And that's true for everybody. Star Wars is an amazing example of a character of that journey, of the hero's journey, like where he starts and where he ends up, and all of the things he has to go to get through there, right?
Hmm.
Same thing with like uh, the Mandalorians. If you get really into like the lore of Star Wars and things like that, you understand their history, where they started and what they became. You know, there again is this massive arc about what they went through to become who they thought they should be,
Hmm.
or what they believe that they should be. And even though this wasn't the intention of the writers or the creators at the time, that the Mandalorians very closely mirror the Spartans
Yes.
in the way that their society was structured and designed, right? Um, so there's a lot to take away from just that. And I think that most stories, most things that we study, like literature and those sorts of things, you can learn a lot of lessons. There's a lot of things that you can take away from that are just sort of like subtext in the story. It's not all about blasters and lightsabers,
Hmm.
right? There is a lot of things you can learn from that, and I think that those things are important, right? The the mark that you have on your arm does do a couple of things. It lets people recognize that you're a fan of that also,
Hmm.
right? And it also, just like I've heard you tell me the story, that people will just randomly will walk up to you and point and say, "This is the way."
A lot of people do. A lot of people, and I love it. I have no problems doing that. I was like, it's such a nice icebreaker
Uh-huh.
because like even there's even times where I'm teaching in class and people are
Right.
like, oh my, or here comes a bearded guy in
Yeah.
cargo pants telling me what to do and all that, and I'm just sitting there talking. I'm actually had one student raise his hand. I'm like, I mean, yeah, what's going on? He's like, this is the way,
Right.
and I laughed. I immediately broke down laughing. I
Yeah.
was like, this is the way.
Yeah.
And, and it was like, what was going on? I'm like, it's a Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
And like I said, a lot of random people come up to me. Like there's times where I'm out in public with my daughter, and you know, I'm always looking at something. I'm always moving my head around,
Mhm.
looking and whatnot.
Right.
And there's people that just randomly come like, dude, I'm like, hey, I'm like, how can I help you? And like he's like, this is the way. I was like, yes. And
Right.
my entire face just changes immediately. It's
Yeah.
just like I'm just sitting there, just kind of just like, and I'm like, yes, 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 let's
Right.
do it. And people are like, wow, okay, total
Yeah.
attitude change. I'm like, yeah, it's like I said, being an instructor and enjoying guns, it's not my personality. It's not
Mhm.
who I am.
Right.
It's what I do,
Yeah.
but it's not who I am. It's like I'm like yeah, deep down, I'm like I'm this big comic book nerd who just likes to sit there and enjoy myself and have a good time.
Yeah.
It's like everybody that really knows me, I'm like I'm always joking, laughing around
Mhm.
and whatnot. It's like that's who I am.
Right. So, like, to that point, though, you and I had met, and I don't know if the first time that I met
Yeah,
you
I was
was
here at the
during
Stop
the
the Bleed
was to
course.
stop the bleed course,
Yep.
right? And that was the very first thing that I said to you,
Yeah.
you know? And it's like that was such an easy thing to like to bond over.
Yeah.
It just kind of creates that sort of community, and just like you're saying, that even when we're doing like high speed things, we're doing things that are like serious and we're dedicated and whatever. That doesn't mean we can't stop and take a step back and be human
Yeah.
and have fun and be goofy and whatever that is, right?
Mhm.
You know, just because being in law enforcement, being a doctor or a lawyer, it's like that's what you do. That's not who you are,
Yeah.
unless you let it become that, right? And I think that's another good point for people to remember. It's like you don't always have to be that,
Yeah.
right? You're fully capable of sitting down and just relaxing and laughing with people. And if you can't do that, you fucking need to,
Yeah.
you know?
And
So
your job is not your life.
yeah, you
And
know,
some people do make it their lives. I'm like, okay,
right,
I won't do that.
right,
I need to, in order for me to effectively do what I do, I need to be able to detach myself from that
hmm,
and just be like, all right, I don't like
right,
there's times where I go see my girlfriend on Sundays.
hmm,
I want nothing, absolutely nothing to do with guns.
right,
Absolutely nothing to do with them.
hmm,
I was like, am I ready and prepared and ready to do anything?
hmm,
Yeah, I am.
yeah,
Same point in time, she's like, hey, let's make some pasta tonight. Let's watch Young Sheldon. Let's watch Big Bang Theory.
hmm,
Let's watch a random movie. I'm like, okay, cool, let's do that. She's like,
right,
let's go to the dog park. I'm like, cool, let's go for a hike. I'm like, all right, cool.
yeah,
It's necessary to catch yourself and just kind of bring yourself back to that home point to be like,
hmm,
just rest, relax,
hmm,
just recharge the batteries.
right,
Because everything you do is constantly about your job, about bam, 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 bam. I'm like, you can only do that so long.
right,
I was like, I'm no spring chicken. I'm still chicken, but I ain't a spring chicken. I need to bring myself back to my center and relax.
right. Well, it's sort of like the people that like take on a job and that they focus so much on that, and they're thinking, well, I'm providing for my wife and my kids, but they get so locked into the to that that they have to do that and they focus on the job
Hmm.
first. It's like they tend to forget why they're doing it in the first place.
Yeah.
It's like if you don't take a step back once in a while and remember this is the actual reason why you're here and this is what you're doing,
Hmm.
well, then all of that is meaningless because I'm telling you right now, if the world ended right now, how many people on the face of this planet would you regret not having said
Like,
the things that are
yeah.
meaningful, that I love you or that I care about you or that, whatever it is.
Like think about all the times like whenever all of us get together and we're like, every time we say hi, I hug you guys.
Hmm.
Every time I see you guys later, I'm like, brother, I love you.
Yeah.
I have no problem saying that. Like, I want to get rid of that fucking stigma of being like, I'm like, dude, you're my brother. I love you. I will tell you I love you before we
Hmm.
leave. Because heaven knows that I may never see you again. I
Right.
don't know that. But I'm gonna tell you, I'm like, I'm gonna hug you. I'm gonna tell you I love you. I'm like, bro, like I can't wait to see you again.
Hmm.
And it's literally just legitimately true. It really is. Like all of our close friends, like even us over at Guardians, like we hug each other, say I
Yeah.
love you, man. And it's like I have no problems. Like I'm there for you. I love you, brother. Like you have my number. Call me.
Hmm.
You're having a shit day. You want to vent? Call me. We both having a shit vent. Hey, we'll go vent. Let's go grab a beer. We'll
Right.
vent together.
Right.
And I was like, I have no problems with that. I was like, everyone in my friend circle, I hug them and I tell them I love you.
Hmm.
I have no problem with that. I'm like, I want you to genuinely know, like you and Hunter, and like I said, and the rest of the team. Every time we always joke around, like when I saw you guys today, you tried to reach shake my hand. I'm like,
Right.
no, give me a hug.
Yeah.
Get over here. Like fucking love you, man.
Right.
And I was just like, man, that's who we are. That's how we should be. Like All my friends are like, just try and reach out and shake my hand. I'm like, get over here, give me a hug.
Mhm. Right.
Like I'm like a cup of feel and all that, but I'm like, hey, brother, like I love you, man.
Right.
I was like, I just know that, just know
Yeah.
that. Like I have your back, you have mine. I'm gonna hug you.
Yeah. That's just always been kind of a thing in the back of my mind that, like, when I talk to people that I care about,
Hmm.
I make sure that I tell them that on a regular basis because tomorrow's not guaranteed.
It's not.
You know, it's important for me that they know how I felt about them.
Yeah. For me, it is like I've even told other people. I'm like, I was like, why do you say I love you? Because I genuinely do. I want you to know that. I'd like to break that stigma of like, we're guys, we need to be tough and all. I'm like, I don't give a shit.
Right.
Like flat out, I'm like, brother, I will hug you, tell you I love you, grab your ass in public, and I don't care. I'm like, you will know I love you. I was
Right.
like, I genuinely don't care. My female friends, different story. I'll hug you, I'll hug you and tell you I love you, but I'm like,
Lawsuits.
lawsuits. I'm like, once again, I want to sleep in my own bed tonight.
Yeah.
But I'm like, yeah, like all my guy friends, and it's like they all know. I'm like, I treat none of you guys differently. Like I
Right.
literally will hug you, tell you I love you, and give you a smack on the ass. Like, good game, brother. Good game. And I have no problem. Like everybody knows it.
Right.
I'm like, if there's time where I don't do it, that's when you're like, what's wrong? And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry. There you go.
There you go.
And it's just like,
Um,
yeah,
we need more of that in the world.
yeah, we do.
So, um, I think that's probably a good place for us to leave off.
Okay.
I am really happy we finally got here. It was a little bit of a struggle.
And there are a couple schedule conflicts, but we got it done. We got it
Very,
done.
and I would certainly love to have you back on again sometime. We'll talk even more and kind of go from there.
Yeah, I love you.
I love you too, brother. All right. Bye, everybody.
See you guys.
Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, you can now support the Non-Victim Nation by donating via listener support directly on Spotify. Remember, the story of your life is being written right now, and you are the hero.